Well, I know that we all just recently opened Christmas gifts, and we got to see other people open Christmas gifts. And sometimes there's this excitement that just bubbles out of somebody as they receive an item that they've wanted, or maybe even something they didn't even know it wasn't on their list, but somebody really shows some insight and some thought as they give them a gift. But other times, there's those ones where you open it and you're like, oh, thank you. You know, like the stereotypically ugly Christmas sweater. You know, like, okay, when am I ever going to wear this until next year at this time? Or a tie that a guy's like, oh, okay, I'm not really sure what situation I'm going to need that in. Or the thing that you're thinking in your mind, like, oh, this is going to make a perfect thing for me to give the next white elephant gift exchange that I have with someone, because I don't need another big mouth Billy Bass to sing on my wall or whatever the particular gift is. Or I can imagine, for instance, let's say that somebody gave you, Shirley, an IU sweatshirt. If you notice, she has a UK jacket here, and if you go to her house, she has a UK wreath on the wall, on the door. Yeah, so of course, in that situation, or okay, somebody was to give your family, Shirley, a UK sweatshirt or something, okay, or Purdue, yes, all right. So there's certain gifts you're like, oh, I don't really want this, but you want to be nice to the person, so you just have in your back of your mind that it's like, okay, this is something that I'm going to re-gift to another person later. I want to pass it on, like the song that we just sang about. But there's also things too that people do give, and because they are so meaningful, you do want to share them with somebody else. I would think that, if somebody gives grandma a cookie sheet, okay, what's she going to do with that cookie sheet? Well, I'm not giving this to grandma because I know there's going to be some benefits that are going to come back my way. Or you receive something, you're like, this is such a blessing. I want to make sure that I use this to, in turn, bless someone else. I want to re-gift in that way. Now, the whole idea of re-gifting, whether it's something you don't like or you do like, and then you want to pass it on to someone else, just in general, the idea of re-gifting has a great foundation in the scriptures. We sang about it some today, about there are some things that we do need to pass on, such as the gospel that we are given. So I want to look at this idea of re-gifting, but you can't really give anything unless you first have received that thing. And so that's what we're going to start with. When we talk about the idea of re-gifting, I want to look at it, how it is that we are supposed to receive before we look at how it is that we are supposed to give. And for starters, I'm going to go to the book of 1 Corinthians. Now, I'm going to be hopping around to lots of different passages today. There is an outline in your sermon notes if you want to take down any notes on any of these passages. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 4, verse 6 says, okay, so how to receive, make sure I'm getting the right spot, okay? Now these things, brethren, I have figuratively applied to myself and Apollos for your sakes, so that you may learn not to exceed what is written, so that none of you will become arrogant on behalf of one against another. Now, you're like, okay, what does that have to do with the re-gifting? 1 Corinthians, if I could subtitle that book of the Bible, it's The Church Stands Corrected. Because the church in Corinth had a lot of problems. Corinth was a very pagan city. It was a place with dual seaports, so that there was lots of traffic through there, very metropolitan type of area, but it was also a very sinful area. And the people who had come to Christ, placed their faith in Jesus, they still had a lot of old baggage that they were dealing with. And one of the problems that they continually dealt with, you see it multiple times in the book of 1 Corinthians, is pride. They had a lot of pride about their spiritual gifts. They had pride also right here, specifically on who it was that discipled them, who it was that led them to Christ. I follow Apollos, I follow Paul, I follow somebody else. And he's saying, no. You can't look at it that way. Now go on to verse 7 to see the antidote for pride. For who regards you as superior? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as if you had not received it? So if you receive a gift, okay, the gift of salvation, the gift of being discipled by someone, a gift, a spiritual gift, which he talks about later in the book, why would you boast about that? You didn't create it. God gave this to you. You've got no reason for boasting. If you boast in anything, boast in God. So we need to receive humbly. That's the first way we receive. Receive humbly. God has given this to you. See, we talk about people being creative. I've got some creative people in my family. They're, artistic. Some people can, write music or create works of art or, theatrical things. They create. But really, when we create, we're just using raw materials that God gave to us. And we're just repackaging them. So we're using the gifting he's given us, the material he's given us to create something. He's the only one that really creates at what's called ex nihilo, out of nothing. And so we need to recognize anything that we are able to do, we need to be humble about it because it's only because God has given us the ability and the materials to be able to do it. But since we didn't create, we also need to receive gratefully. We need to receive with gratitude. Receive gratefully. In James 1:17, it says that every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of heavenly lights who does not change like shifting shadows. He is the one who has created everything, and he's the one that gives it. If you have anything good, it's because God gave it to you. And so we need to have that gratitude. Now, a really good example of this comes in the Old Testament, the book of 1 Chronicles. Now, 1 Chronicles ends as David is gathering supplies for building a temple. He wanted to build a temple to the glory of God. God was so important to him, I want to build it, but he said, no, you're not. God said, no, you're not going to build it. Your son's going to be able to build a temple. But David took time and he amassed all the materials that would be necessary for the building of the temple. And he gave very generously to this, and so did the people. So David led the way in giving of his resources, and the people gathered around, and they gave more resources as well, so that everything would be available for the building of the temple. But I don't want us to focus on how much was given. I want to focus now on the perspective that they had as they gave, the attitude with which they gave. So 1 Chronicles 29, I wanted to read you verses 11 to 16. This is David praying. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. Indeed, everything that is in the heavens and the earth, yours is the dominion, O Lord, and you have exalted yourself as head over all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. And in your hand is power and might, and it lies in your hand to make great and to strengthen everyone. Now, therefore, our God, we thank you. We praise your glorious name. But who am I, and who are my people, that we should be able to offer as generously as this? For all things come from you, and from your hand we have given to you. For we are sojourners before you and tenants, as are all our fathers were. Our days on the earth are like a shadow, and there is no hope. O Lord our God, all of this abundance that we have provided to build you a house for your holy name, it is from your hand, and all is yours. So David realizes, if I have it, it's only because you gave it to me. If I own it, it's only because it really belongs to you and you just entrusted it to me. This is the idea of stewardship. God owns it and we are stewards, or another more modern term would be managers. Okay, a manager is often not an owner of the company. They're just a person who have been put in charge of kind of ordering it and keeping it in line to do business with it. And that's what we are. So this brings us to another way that we are to receive. And 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2 mentions this. In this case, moreover, it is required of stewards that one be found trustworthy. Okay, so if you are a steward, if it's been entrusted to your hand, okay, I need to be faithful with what God has put into my hand. Okay, and that's the next point, that we need to be faithful. We need to receive faithfully. So if I pray for something and God gives it to me, I need to realize he's entrusting this to me. He's not just giving it to me. He's entrusting it for me to handle it well. Now, this certainly qualifies for like financial resources, but for opportunities, for roles of service. You know, he wants me to be faithful in my leadership role in the church. He wants each of you to be faithful with the children or the family members that he's put into your care, with friends that he brings your way, opportunities he gives you. He wants you to be faithful. He's got something he wants you to do with what it is that he gives to you. So we are managers. Now there's a really good parable that helps to bring this out. And this is the parable of the talents. Okay, it's in Matthew chapter 25. Now when you hear the word talent, don't think that the person can sing and dance. Okay, a talent was a measurement of money. It was actually a huge measurement of money. A single talent was probably worth about 15 years' wages for a person. So think in the like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars. And so it's a very, very large sum. So in the parable of the talents, Matthew 25, and we're going to start in verse 14. For it's just like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. So basically he was an investor, he was a businessman. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more, but the one who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted me 5 talents, and see, I've gained 5 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, the parable goes on to talk about the faithfulness of the second guy, but the third guy was not considered faithful because what he was given, he just kept, he hid it, and then gave it back when the master returned. And he was considered a wicked and lazy slave. He was not one that was considered faithful. See, we are given not to keep, but we are given to use for the master's purposes. So when he entrusts something to us, it's because he's got a job for us to do with it. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy it along the way. You know, we are supposed to enjoy what we do, but it's not primarily for your benefit. It's not primarily for your enjoyment. It's for the master's business. It's for the master's kingdom. So when God gives us something, we need to be faithful with it by putting it to work. So that brings us to now, how is it that we are supposed to give? How are we supposed to give? So I want to start with a really concise statement in Matthew chapter 10. Verse 8. Let's go to the next verse here, Jerry. Freely you received, freely give. So how are we supposed to give? Generously. Give generously because we have been freely given, so we need to freely give out to others. So now I'm going to take that little verse, or those 4 words there, freely you received, 5 words, freely give. Let's zoom out just a little bit and see the context in which they are said. So this is Matthew chapter 10, verses 7 and 8. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Freely you received, freely give. So here he is not talking about financial, material resources. He is talking about kingdom benefits. Okay? So if you see a person who is sick, God says, you can heal that person. You can cast out demons. You can set the prisoner free. You have been set free. You have been raised up. You have been given a new life. You need to give this out to other people. As a matter of fact, if we were to go back a few verses to verse 1, let's see what he has given to his disciples before he sent them out. Jesus summoned his 12 disciples, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. He gave them authority. So what does Jesus say later on, just before he goes up to heaven? All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples, okay? So here he is saying to them, I am entrusting you with authority to do my business. Now go out and freely give to everybody else what I have given to you. And so we go out with God's message of freedom and new life and blessing and healing, and we go out and we minister that. Now, it's something that some of us may think it's like, wow, do I really have that authority? Yes. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, he has given us that authority. This is not just limited to the 12 apostles. Okay? We still have that authority now to be able to heal, to perform miracles. We use that term, perform, to do the miraculous on God's behalf, to declare his kingdom. And so what we do is we go out and we preach the kingdom, and then what does God do? He demonstrates the power of the kingdom. So if you want to see God's power, go do the preaching. Now, when I say preaching, that's declaring. It's not necessarily saying like you're a pastor up in front. What's preaching? Preaching is declaring. So we go out and we say, this is what God has brought to earth. his kingdom power to undo the work of the enemy. So you see someone bound up in sickness, disease, addiction. God says, you can go and you can pronounce my healing. You can declare it. And then we let God back it up with miracles. We don't do the miracles. God does the miraculous. But if you look through the scriptures, so often that comes as a demonstration of the truth of the message that is being declared. So go forth and preach God's message. So how do we give? We give generously, but we also give joyfully. Joyfully. In the book of 2 Corinthians, Paul is talking to them, and he's saying that he's coming to them, and he's going to take up a collection before the poor saints back in Jerusalem. So there's Christians back in Jerusalem, Judea, and they are much poorer than some of the Christians in the surrounding areas. And so he's going to Corinth, and he says, I'm going to take up the collection that I already told you about, and I want you to be ready. But he tells them how it is that they can be ready to give. So 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 11. Now this I say, he who sows, plants, sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must do as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that always having all sufficiency in everything, you may have abundance for every good deed. As it is written, he scattered abroad and gave to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in everything for all liberality, which through us is producing thanksgiving to God. He says you should be joyful in your giving, and he talks about how God is able to supply and multiply. So what is he able to do? He is able to give you seed, resource, and he is able to multiply that. Why? So that you can freely give to others. It's not, he wants to meet your need. Yes, he's promised to meet our needs. But if he puts more than you need into your hand, it's so that you can sow it. You can spread that seed out. And what happens to seeds? When they grow, they multiply. And so as you invest in another person, they are going to be able to invest in another person who's going to be able to invest in another person. A seed planted is going to produce much more than a seed eaten. So if God gives to us, very often, the majority of that is for spreading on to other people. You receive so that you can give. Now I want to read to you a thank you note that Paul writes. In the book of Philippians, Paul, he's in prison when he's writing this. And so back then, prisoners didn't get 3 square meals a day, all their needs provided for. They were dependent often on people who were outside prison to bring resources to them. So Paul is in prison, and the Philippian Christians have helped him out. So in chapter 4, I want to start in verse 14. Nevertheless, you, Philippians, have done well to share with me in my affliction. You yourselves know, Philippians, that at the first preaching of the gospel after I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, except you only. For even in Thessalonica, it's another town, a city over there, you sent a gift more than once for my needs. Not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek for the profit which increases to your account. And this shows us that we also need to give hopefully. We give hopefully. He says, you've shared with me, and that's great. I really benefited from it, but I know how to get by with little. I know how to get by with nothing. God takes care of all of that. But I'm encouraging you to give, not because of my need, but because of how it's going to benefit you. Because it increases to your account. Did you know that every time that you give, God sees it, and he keeps track of it? And if you are giving with a right heart, God rewards those kind of gifts. And again, this is not just material giving. This is sacrificing of your time, your talents, your treasures. When you're giving emotionally, when you're opening your life, opening your home to other people, God sees all of that. And he's keeping track of it. And we give because we know that he is going to reward. Now, if you're a person who's familiar with the scriptures, you understand that sometimes you read Matthew, you read Mark, you read Luke or whatever, and you see similar stories in them, but they're not always told exactly the same way. Sometimes I've preached a message one way in one place, and I'll preach it another way in another place. So it's Jesus taught the same truths in different ways to different people at different times. Well, the parable of the talents that we read earlier, he tells something very similar, the parable of the minas. It's another type of unit of currency. And it's the same idea. To some he gives this amount, and people earn different amounts by what he's given them. But instead of the reward being saying, come, I'll bless you, thank you for this. He says to those who were faithful with the minas, you were faithful in a little bit, now take charge of 10 cities. Take charge of 5 cities. You invested my material wealth now. I am giving you authority, rulership over these different areas. So that's in the parable there. So a faithfulness in a small amount, God gives much. It's a multiplied investment. This is also true in relationships. So in Luke chapter 18, verse 29. Let's go on to that next slide, Jerry, rather than me trying to turn to it there. Okay. And he said to them, truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or wife or brothers or parents or children for the sake of the kingdom of God who will not receive many times as much in this time and in the age to come, eternal life. So it's not just leaving, surrendering your possessions, but it's even surrendering relationships for the sake of the kingdom. I am going to leave all behind. Doesn't mean you walk out on your family. Okay? Don't get that idea. If you need to support your family, you need to do that. But he's saying if you are leaving behind other things and prioritizing my kingdom, you will receive so much more. I was really proud of Elizabeth. She's a very hard worker, just turned 18. And so one of the things she did, I think it was the week after her 18th birthday, she opened her retirement account. And I was like, okay, how many 18-year-olds are going to do this? So she had money that she had worked for, saved, and so she put it in there. And one of the things that I wish that I would have known when I was younger was how much a little investment now can pay off long-term later. And I may get the numbers wrong, but this is something I got from Dave Ramsey, and this is the best of my recollection. So if you can get a high school student who the summer between their freshman and sophomore year, they work and save, do that between their sophomore and junior and senior year. So 3 different summers. If they can earn $1,000 a summer and put it aside, just save that. When they turn 18, invest that in a Roth IRA. If the stock market does what it has done over the last 50 years or whatever, investment-wise, that $3,000 by the time they retire will be worth about $500,000 without ever putting another penny in there. Yeah, you work in investments, that's the way it works. Okay, so we told Elizabeth this, and so she's taken it to heart, and she's put the money in so that she can go ahead and start saving for her retirement. So I'm super proud of her. But let me tell you, the investment in the stock market, in a Roth IRA, Jesus pays a lot better than Roth. He is going to reward you, not just with material blessings, and he often gives us lots of material blessings, but with eternal blessings. Not things that are just going to be there for us in retirement, but they're going to be there for us in eternity. God is able to reward us for what we give. Monetarily, but we also saw, relationally, authority, joy, all the things that you sacrifice now for the sake of God and his kingdom is worth it and will pay dividends over and over again, way more. That parable of the minas, okay? I don't know how much a mina was worth, but it wasn't worth a talent, okay? It wasn't that huge amount. They invested the master's money. I see in this person character, godliness. They prioritize my kingdom. They get it. And so what's he going to do? I'm going to give you authority over cities. I'm going to make you a ruler over it. He is going to expand it so much more. There is nothing that you can give that God cannot outgive you in return. Now, giving also, though, we are supposed to do it worshipfully. Philippians chapter 4, verse 18, I stopped short of it, okay? He says, but I have received everything in full, Paul says, and have abundance. And I'm amply supplied, having received from Epaphroditus, he was the person that carried the gift, what you have sent. And then look how he describes it. A fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. Now, throughout the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's lots of animal sacrifices, grain sacrifices, oil sacrifices, things would get burned on an altar, incense. And then God says, it rises up before me as a soothing aroma. It's a pleasant smell. Okay, you guys all know what it is to be in your yard and to smell your neighbor barbecuing, right? It's like, oh, wow, it's time to go out and talk to the neighbor over the fence. It's like, oh, what you grilling there? And, hoping they'll invite you over for supper. Okay, it's a pleasing aroma. God says, when I see your giving, okay, when you give to others on behalf of me, that's a soothing aroma. That pleases me. It makes God happy. Just like the worship in the Old Testament when they'd offer bulls and goats and sheep and other things on the altar, God says, I see that, I smell that. This is good. This is good. God sees what you do, and he is very, very pleased when we give. Now, what is worship? Worship is just our right response to God that sees who he is, glorifies him, honors him. When we respond rightly to God, that is worship. As a matter of fact, it can be giving anything. In Matthew chapter 25, verses 37 to 40, he says, at the end of time, he has a parable to describe the end time. God's going to separate his people, or the people of earth, into the sheep and the goats, just like a shepherd would separate the two groups. Okay, the sheep represent the faithful, the goats represent those who didn't follow him. Look what he says. The righteous, the sheep, will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to visit you? And then what does he say? The king, this is representing Jesus, is going to answer and say to them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. And so whoever in the name of a disciple gives to one of these little ones even a cup of cold water to drink, truly I say to you, he shall not lose his reward. Now, that last verse there was actually from the Matthew passage where he sent them out to go and preach and gave them authority to drive out demons and heal the sick and do all those things. But he says, even a cup of cold water, the smallest of gestures, is something I keep track of, I notice, and I am going to reward. So, I want to end with this practical application, okay? And our worship team can go ahead and come up and prepare to lead us. This is going to be a real practical way to make this message portable, hopefully something that you will be able to remember. So I want you guys to each pick a hand and raise it in the air, okay? It doesn't matter if it's your left or your right, okay? So raise your hand, okay? So if God entrusts something to you, you can put the hand down now, okay? Like this. If God gives you something, he places it in your hand, right? Okay? And then he places another blessing in your hand and another blessing in your hand. Whatever he has placed in your hand, I mean, you used these hands to open gifts this week, right? On Christmas. And think of the things that hand has touched this week. Okay? You've probably reached for your wallet or your purse. You've held the hand of a loved one. You have, gripped the steering wheel in your car. You have used it to eat with, okay? Anything that hand has touched, remember, what do you have that you have not received? If your hand has touched it, that's because God has placed it into your hand. All of those things that hand has touched this week, those are your blessings, okay? So this hand that you have received, just remember that. Now, lift up the other hand, okay? This hand isn't your receiving hand. This is your giving hand, okay? The one that you dole out the presents with. Right? So you've got your receiving hand and you've got your giving hand. Which one's getting more exercise? God has blessed us so much. I've received so much. My receiving hand, boy, it could wear out from all the blessings that God has given. Is my giving hand getting just as much exercise as I take those blessings and I pass them along, share them with other people? That's what God calls us to do. He wants us to be those who re-gift to others. Sometimes that means you take what you have and you take it from yourself and you get rid of it. Okay, like when you're giving of money or material possessions. Sometimes, though, you retain the gift that he has given you, but you use it in service to other people. You use it to express his love to others. I'm just going to use a car, for example. If somebody needs a ride, yes, I'm going to give them a ride. If I use the baking sheets, okay? If you've got your cooking utensils. I got blessed by my brother-in-law's cooking utensils this week. And I'm feeling it. right? Because he's blessed me so much. Sometimes those blessings are ones that you keep, but you use in service to others. Make sure that giving hand is getting lots of exercise. Spread the gifts, because remember, God's keeping track of all that. And you don't do it just for the rewards, but that's an awful big benefit, right? That we get those rewards. We do it because he's worthy of worship. And anytime that I give to someone else, he says, that's like you're giving to me. That's like you're giving to me. And it makes me so happy. So we do it for worship. We do it as a witness to other people as well. To say, you see how much Jesus loves you as we give to them as well. So as we have our closing song, let the Lord speak to your heart. Maybe even look at your hands as you're singing. Lord, thank you for giving me so much. Who can I give to? What can I give as a way of worshiping you? And if you want someone to pray with you, I'll be right down front.